Hey everyone, I'm Audrey Christie, holistic wellness practitioner with audreychristie.com. I help patients get better from the roots up and the inside out. If you're joining me on the replay, welcome. Be sure and leave a question below and I'll come by and answer it as soon as possible. It is a beautiful spring day here in Texas, and today we are talking about inflammation, right? And so we all know we know the drill, right? You know what inflammation causes, but we're going to touch on some of that. So usually the way my clients come to me and find out that they have inflammation is that they've done something like cut calories, started working out at the gym, and they're still not losing weight. Or maybe they're losing weight, but they're not losing anything around the middle. A good indicator is having low energy or fatigue or sleepiness or skin problems. Those are all pretty good signs that you're having some sort of inflammatory problem. There are also signs that you can look for on lab work, which I won't bore you with all of the blood chemistry behind that. I'm sorry, it's windy and my hair keeps blowing in my face. But inflammation gets a pretty bad reputation, and it should. It's the main cause or the underlying root cause of so many different illnesses and chronic issues and even major disease processes in the body. And so it's important to know that inflammation isn't all bad, right? So you should think of inflammation as your body's defense system. And so its job is when it senses an invader that it doesn't like, know, or trust, then your body actually sends out cells to defend itself against this invader. Now, the trick is that sometimes this invader isn't an invader at all. It's something that you put in your body, right? Like maybe you ate something or consumed something. Other times inflammation can be really, really good because it's actually your first line of healing, right? And so doctors are now starting to get the idea and turn people away from using anti-inflammatories when they first get injured or first thing post-operatively, simply because an anti-inflammatory kills all the inflammation. And inflammation is your first line of healing, right? So whether you have surgery or whether you fall and tear your ACL or break a bone, inflammation happens first. That's what draws the healing property to the area on the body so that the body can perform the cellular repair, which then turns into the outward physical repair that you can see. So if you take anti-inflammatory medications like Advil or NSAIDs, whichever ones are left on the market these days, Aleve or aspirin even, you're actually stopping your primary healing response before it can get started. So sidebar, this isn't really what this live stream's about, but if you have surgery or if you're having surgery, wait 6 to 8 weeks before you start using Advil as your pain relief. Go ahead and use whatever the doctor gives you or maybe Tylenol instead. But again, that was just a sidebar. So if you fall into the category of inflammation, then this is definitely for you. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about some ways to reduce that. If you don't think you fall into that you have inflammation, that you're suffering from some kind of chronic low-grade inflammation, then ask yourself, are you full of energy? Are you sleeping well? Do you have skin problems like rashes, itchy skin, sometimes acne, cysts? If you get those subdural cysts or subdermal cysts, that can be a sign of inflammation. If you have bumpy chicken skin, that can be a sign of inflammation. Do you suffer from seasonal allergies? So you can see in the tree behind me, that's an oak tree, and it's pollen season. And me 5 years ago, I probably couldn't have been sitting out here talking to you without eyes running, nose itching, sneezing. I don't have seasonal allergies anymore because I reduced the inflammation in my body. And the same goes for most people. So if you have seasonal allergies, that's not normal. That's a sign of low-grade chronic inflammation that's happening in your body right now. Also mood disorders. Those can be signs of chronic low-grade inflammation. And usually, like I said, I'm calling it chronic low-grade inflammation because usually that's the cause. There are some cases where we find out that it's actually a really big, some sort of big inflammation, but that's not always the case. So let's look at some of the common culprits, and some of these you've heard me talk about before. One of them is sugar. Sugar is highly, highly inflammatory, and so is its cousin, artificial sweeteners, right? So when you eat too much sugar, and generally, this isn't true for everyone, but generally too much sugar is about 100 to 120 grams of unmitigated sugar. And so what do I mean by unmitigated sugar? So if you eat a pile of lettuce, that has sugars in it, right? That's something that your body turns into glucose. However, it's also counterbalanced by nature's counterbalance of fiber. If you eat a giant bowl of potato chips, that's also sugars, glucose converted to sugar in the body, carbohydrates. But when you eat that, it's not balanced by fiber. So that would be unmitigated, right? Unbalanced. And so that's what you want to be careful of. But when you have too much sugar, your body can't process it. It can't process the glucose fast enough. And so basically that extra glucose gets shuttled out into the bloodstream, and your body's immune system releases a low-grade attack against it. And if you do this all the time, then it's just chronically in attack mode. And it's really, you might think, well, gosh, I don't eat that much sugar. Sometimes it's really, really hard, even if you're not drinking sodas, you're not reaching for a Snickers bar, you're not eating, cereal and milk for breakfast. Sometimes it's really hard to determine what foods have sugar in them and what foods don't. A good rule of thumb is that if it comes in a package, if you have to open it, then it probably has sugar in it. It may not say sugar because there's a whole lot of different names they can call sugar. But if you open it from a package, then generally it has sugar in it. They use it as a preservative. That brings me to the second thing. We'll talk about artificial sweeteners in a minute. Vegetable oils, because packaged foods are also a lot of the times preserved in vegetable oils. And when I say vegetable oils, I'm not just talking about vegetable oil, quote unquote vegetable oil. I'm also talking about foods fried in vegetable oils and everything that goes into that category. So that's soy oil, corn oil, safflower, sunflower oil, palm oils. All of those things are omega-6 oils, which are inflammatory oils, not to be confused with omega-3s. That's the opposite, right? So all of those things are inflammatory oils. And in addition, when they come in a package like that, there's two problems with vegetable oils. When it's in a package, it's often rancid, so that just automatically is inflammatory to your body. When it's fried in food, you produce something called AGEs, advanced glycation end products. So it took me a minute to come up with what that was, but and basically those are free radicals that cause aging, that cause inflammation, that cause very specific disease processes in the body. The next thing to talk about is gluten. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, I can totally eat bread, it's fine. Or maybe think that gluten sensitivity is not common. But in patients with inflammatory diseases, whether it be acute and obvious like arthritis, psoriasis, those sort of inflammatory diseases, or inflammatory bowel disease, or something that's a little bit less obvious. So maybe it's just irritable bowel syndrome, or some trouble digesting food, or some, bathroom issues. Almost everyone benefits from getting rid of gluten. There are very few, I'd say less than 5% of people that can consume gluten without issue. And so for most people, having to cut out gluten, if not all grains, really, really, really makes worlds of difference in reducing inflammation in your entire body. So it's actually really, really smart to reduce or eliminate grains because they're pro-inflammatory foods, even if you don't have an actual allergy or sensitivity to them. Another one is dairy, and this is the one that I get the most pushback on. People say, oh, I can tolerate dairy, it's fine. In every person, dairy produces a mucus reaction. So if you have seasonal allergies and you eat cheese and you drink milk and you put creamer in your coffee, that's probably what's causing your seasonal allergies. If you get sick a lot, if you have the colds, if you're always the person that catches the cold going around the office or the school or whatever, probably dairy. And so what I encourage people to do, because they look at this and they think, well, I have to give up dairy. And for a lot of people, that's a lot harder to give up than gluten. I can understand why. Cheese is amazing, right? But if you can give that up for 48 to 72 hours and then add it back in and see what the difference makes, oftentimes you will find that that is the culprit for many of your problems, and you'll feel so good you won't want to add it back in. So keep that in mind. I've got two more. The last two I'm going to talk to you about. One is artificial sweeteners, and you guys know that those are bad for you, right? So they cause inflammation in the body. I'm not going to harp on them too long because it's been long standing that they cause inflammation and cancer and all sorts of things. But if you're in that group that you think, well, you know what, everything causes cancer these days. Well, here's something worse. Artificial sweeteners actually cause glucose intolerance, which leads to type 2 diabetes. It also worsens, makes existing type 2 diabetes more critical, okay? And so you want to make sure that type 2 diabetes is a much more common and a more deadly problem because it occurs more often than cancer. So you really want to watch those artificial sweeteners. If your body doesn't recognize it, if your mind doesn't recognize it as an ingredient that you're familiar with, then don't put it in your body because your body's not going to recognize it either. You also, if you're somebody who says, you know what, forget it. Artificial sweeteners can actually cause intolerances to other foods, right? Because if you ingest artificial sweeteners, studies show it disrupts your gut biome, which actually causes more inflammation, more trouble digesting and processing, and putting to use even foods that you should be able to enjoy, like fresh fruits, vegetables, quality meats, and that sort of thing. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. Avoid artificial sweeteners. If you must have something, look for something like monk fruit sugar or organic stevia. Those are about the only two that are safe, right? And then lastly, stress. And stress is so often overlooked. We always look at what can we stop putting in our bodies that, will reduce inflammation, that will make us feel better and all this sort of stuff. A lot of it is stress, and stress comes in so many different forms. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing this live stream outside today. I'm sitting outside barefoot with my feet on the ground because I'm earthing. And earthing is a simple way. If you can't meditate, if you're not somebody who sits in prayer often, if you can't reduce your stress naturally, then or by naturally, I mean unassisted, then a really good way to do that is to come outside, put your bare feet on the earth for about 15 to 20 minutes. If you're in a region where it's too cold to do that, you can there's a tree beside me, but you can put your hand on an alive tree. And it works the same way that the outlet in your house works. It takes the positive charge out of you, and in this respect, a positive charge is actually a bad thing. So you're actually releasing the positive electrons, which is negative energy from your body back into the earth, just like a ground plug. When you plug it into an outlet, the little third hole grounds the electrical current to the earth. And I'll dive deeper into how our human body is full of electrical current all the time. And just a small window of that is if you've ever had an EKG, you can see that your heart produces an electric beat on the monitor, right? And so it's sort of the same principle, but going outside grounds you to the earth, to the ground, to Terra, and actually releases the positive electrons. So kick the flip-flops off and put your feet on the earth to help reduce stress. Other methods of reducing stress, of course, are meditation and prayer and movement and yoga and all of those things that you can do. And then, I didn't touch on it very much, but stress actually causes cellular damage to your DNA. So it actually changes the way you were programmed to be. Okay. And so stress will cause an immune response. So just the same as when you get strep throat, and your body sends out a whole host of white blood cells to fight it, and that immune cascade starts. Stress does the same thing. You get stressed, your body sends out the immune cascade and starts the inflammation response to fight stress. Okay, so make sure that you're being cautious, being mindful of the different things that you're putting into your body. Monitor your stress levels and reduce that inflammation. And as you do, it'll take time, it's not overnight, but as you reduce that inflammation, you will see chronic illnesses start to lift, you will see fatigue and brain fog start to lift, you'll have more energy, you'll sleep better, you'll be less dependent on things like caffeine and energy drinks and tea and all of those things. So I encourage you to do that. Again, if you have any questions, please put them down below and I will come back and answer them. I hope you guys have a beautiful afternoon. Namaste.